Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Heretical Heathen podcast. I am your host, Robert Knox, and this week we're continuing our scrying sessions. And for those of you who don't know, I will be appearing in my first ever interview over on Midgard Musings podcast. If you guys haven't checked out Jesse over at Midgard Musings, give him some views, give him a shout out. He's been a dedicated heathen for I'm not sure, probably a few decades now at least. Everything he puts out is really good. He's great, brings on a lot of good people. He's had on Dr. Scott Shell and Eric Westcoat, Eric Westcoat, and a host of a bunch of other people. He's had people from all over the spectrum, from Asa True Guys to Thadesman. And despite the fact that Jesse is not an overtly political individual, he doesn't really touch politics too much. Social media and the powers that be seem to really not like him that much. He's constantly having like strikes going on and things happen with his social media account. So I think there's something special going on with Jesse that maybe we should pay more attention to. And yeah, go check out his work. Give him some views. If you like what he's doing, you can sign up for his Patreon. It's as low as $1 a month. He's a great person, a great content creator, and I can't wait to have my first interview with him. Though I am very nervous. I'm not really an interview person. Sure, I'm on a lot of platforms now, and I talk a lot of shit on Twitter because, well, it's fun. I'm not really the kind of person to go on podcasts, and I'm not very good at yapping for long periods of time. So we'll see how this goes. I am excited though. With all that said, let's get to the scrying sessions. Now, with our last episode, I covered Uruz, and now we're on to Thurisaz. Thurisaz is another one of those interesting runes that has a multiplicity of meanings, and I'm never quite sure why. It's typically translated as Thorn, but yet there's somehow this association that came about where it's also associated with Mjolnir, Thor's mighty hammer, and the Thurisaz, like the giants, which is a bit strange, right? So you have these two sort of contradicting forces, both being embodied in a single rune. I'm not quite sure how that happened. If anyone has more insight on that, leave a comment below. But it is kind of interesting to see this rune represent these forces of potential chaos and also the weapon that destroys those potential forces of chaos, or at least the weapon that, let's say, keeps them in line. And this session went a little differently than my other sessions. Sort of every other time I've gone into these, say, room realms, that's been kind of the same. There's kind of a story. Well, this one was a little different. So I did what I normally do. I set up my altar, did all of the beginning rituals, the circumambulation, all that stuff. I sat in a chair facing east, and I sort of started breathing, trying to get into that nice liminal space. And I opened up in my temple, and I noticed that the animals that usually hang out there, whether they're fetches or fiogias, spirit animals, totems, whatever you want to call them, they started acting a little differently. Sometimes they're there, but you don't really see them. Maybe they're walking around. But this time they demanded attention. Especially this skunk animal that keeps showing up suddenly. There's an albino skunk. Maybe I've been watching too many reels of adorable skunks. But he was there, and he was being real feisty. So I decided to give him attention. I gave him some petting, some loving. And then I went to an apple tree that I keep in my temple, and I grabbed an apple from the tree and I offered it to the skunk. Now, from I guess more of a Jungian perspective, you can think of the skunk as a potential symbol of an instinct, and maybe there's some sort of instinct going on that's trying to prevent me from doing something. And so I grabbed an apple from the tree, sort of trying to calm that instinct down. And then I took a single bite of it myself, and then I offered it to the skunk. And so I looked ahead. I had the Thurisaz door. I walked through the door, and I was brought into a jungle, which of course makes a lot of sense if you read some of the interpretations of Thurisaz. It's Thorn, and so of course there's going to be a lot of plant imagery that may just be embedded in that image. And I could hear the birds, and I could feel the humidity of the environment. And the path I was on was like a dirt path, but then it suddenly disappeared, and I was lost. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't see anything. And so I reached out for a guide, but none came. I was all alone. And eventually, this short little pygmy figure wearing like a black wooden mask appeared before me. And of course, as I mentioned before, you test these things, and quite naturally, it failed the test. So I continued to like move on going through the jungle, and then suddenly the jungle became more like a forest. And by forest, I mean the sort of forest you might see in North America. Now, in this forest, I found a stream, and so I decided to go and take a drink of the stream. And then suddenly, while I'm drinking from the stream, I remembered all the sort of celestial signs that showed up in other sessions. And as soon as that thought entered my consciousness, a wooden stairway up to the sky appeared. So I decided to climb the stairs. And as I was going up the stairs, eventually, I got to the top of the clouds. And then, as in every other scrying session, I noticed the Thurisaz rune in the sky. In the stars, I should say. And then suddenly, from the clouds arose like a being, like a humanoid shape. And then it became one of these sort of Gandalfish figures that I see in a lot of these sessions. And so I asked about this particular form, because I'm very curious why these things keep showing up. And the being responded that it goes from the clouds to this wizard figure because it's a form in which I can understand. And you see this a lot in these woo spaces where it seems that whatever the phenomenon is, it's taking a form to interface with our particular consciousness in a way that we can understand. Now, this cloud figure, he informs me that now is not an appropriate time to be doing this work, and that I will gain nothing from doing it. And so he takes me and he leads me back to the starting point, back into my temple, and from here the session ends. And I kind of wanted to highlight this because you sort of see all these fanciful scrying sessions where everyone's having these epiphanies and these breakthroughs, and not every time is like that. Sometimes you don't get any images at all. Other times, maybe you go on like I do, and the spirits of that realm let you know, hey, bud, you shouldn't be here. This is not for you. This is not the appropriate time. You fucked it up somehow. You need to redo this at a later date. And so I took like a week off, and then I did it again. On my second attempt at scrying Thurisaz, I did it a little differently. I decided to not do all of the preliminary rituals. I decided to not open my vey, not do, let's say, the pentagram rituals. And I just lit a candle and decided to go in just to see what would happen. So like before, I entered my astral temple, pictured the door before me, and then I walked through it and ended up right back into those jungle lands from before. And as I was walking through, I felt as though those pygmy creatures were surrounding me. There was more than one, and they were sort of hopping up and down, but they were just out of view, like I couldn't quite make them out. And I didn't focus on them. They didn't draw my attention like the first time through. And so as I walked through them, essentially, they seemed harmful, so didn't seem like a big deal. I eventually came to what looked like a giant rose. And when I say giant, I mean, 4 to 5 stories, if not larger. A very, very large rose. And before it sat some wooden stairs. And so I walked up the wooden stairs to get to a doorway on the rose, on the stem of the rose. Kind of almost sounds like something you would end up seeing in Skyrim. And so I went through the doorway into the rose, and just like the lighthouse in some of my previous sessions, there was a guide there holding a lantern. And so I gave him the tests, which he passed, and then he pointed to a set of stairs that spiraled up to the top of the rose. Now, I tried to go up the stairs, and when I reached out for the railing, something stabbed my hand, like a thorn stabbed my hand, and I was bleeding. And this was a bit concerning and a bit uncomfortable, but I thought, what the hell, let's continue. And so I continued walking up the stairs, and then I reached out with my left hand to the other railing, and the same thing happened. So now I have 2 pierced hands, or at least 2 bloody hands. I'm like a heathen Jesus. And so I walked up the stairs and to the top of the tower, which is the top of the rose. So I'm standing on giant rose petals. And I'm greeted at the top by like a plant being. It kind of looks like a humanoid figure, but made out of like vines and thorns, and kind of looks like a flower head. And it puts its hands on me, like on my shoulder, and it points to the sky. And from here I look up, and then suddenly I find myself flying towards the sky. And so I fly up to the clouds, and I find myself in a celestial realm again. I'm in space. And the Milky Way is now in the shape of Thurisaz. And before me, a Thurisaz rune appears, and it opens up like a door. And I decide to walk through the door. And as I step through it, it's a place of pure light. Sort of like, if any of you guys have watched Full Metal Alchemist, it's very much like the space where truth appears. All white, there's like a little figure there. And in this space of just pure light, there's a gray door. And I walk up to the gray door. And much like how Odin had to sacrifice his eye, I had to likewise sacrifice my eye to open the door. And when the door opens, I step through, and now I'm in a place devoid of light. It's a place of pure darkness. And out of the darkness, a giant orb appears. I don't know what it is. I try to look at it, but I can't quite make it out. And I can't find my orientation either. And suddenly I'm on top of the orb. And as we move through the darkness, this giant orb-like figure violently flings me back into my astral temple. And the doors close, and suddenly I find myself back in my body. Part of the program I'm doing requires that after a scrying session, we dedicate at least 3 days to meditation on the sessions, looking at them from all angles. And while I was at work, I remembered some of the Rune Guild curriculum that I had been reading, and it dawned on me that I could use something in there to potentially look at these things from other angles. So I chose, I think they have a special word for it, but I'm just going to call them mudras, like hand positions for particular runes. So I had one come to me for Thurisaz, and I decided to try to use it during meditation. And the way this worked is I made my hands into a particular shape. I chanted the rune. So I'm sitting in the dark, essentially chanting Thurisaz while going through the scrying sessions, which sounds like a lot, but you find by like overloading your senses, it's sort of easier to slip into the liminal spaces. I wonder if drumming has that same effect for those more like shamanically inclined. And as I was meditating, sort of the first thing that caught my attention was the color scheme in the visions. There was a lot of green and browns in the original vision. And I also went from like a lush jungle atmosphere to something like a fall northern forest. And so there's like a theme of the changing of seasons going from life to death. Like it's almost like a rebirth sort of symbolism going on there. Then I found myself standing before the giant orb in the darkness. I was brought right to that. And then what I noticed is it's not like an orb at all, it's a giant eye. And now I was caught in its gaze, which was quite frightening. I'm in an area with no light, with a giant eye looking at me. And the eye asked, "What do you want, human?" Which is never good, right? When something just calls you a human. Very scary. And I don't really know, I guess, to be enlightened or something. I have no idea. I kind of just do these things because I feel a calling to do them. It's as if I'm being led by something that's not quite me. And at that point, I found myself back in my temple, and the Thurisaz rune appeared in my temple and covered the wall in thorns. And so I have this thought, and I don't know yet, that maybe with each session, each time I explore one of these rune realms, that they have some kind of effect on the temple itself. And of course, by extension, they have some effect on me. Because in some sense, like I am the temple and the temple is me. Or at the very least, it's within me. And so I ended my practice with a prayer to the Most High. Now, for those of you who think that sounds silly and are in the heathen sphere, I'm a Platonist, and so I tend to think that there is an ontological prior, a necessary being that emanates outwards and produces everything else. Although the language of production might get a little squirrely with Platonism. And so I ended a prayer to the Most High, asking it to remove anything that may have latched onto me during the practice. Sometimes I will also reach out to Thor and ask Thor to wield his mighty Mjolnir and destroy any sort of harmful Jotun that may have attached itself, or even a small little parasite during these practices. And I think that's a good thing to do. If you're a heathen and you're doing this kind of stuff, maybe consider doing this more often. I notice there's a lot of people in the heathen sphere that seem to have a lot of parasites. They seem to have problems with their mentality, let's say. And I think it would do real good if we had some more purification practices. And sometimes something as simple as asking that which is above to help you is all you're going to need. And of course, I also asked for knowledge because I'm kind of a magician, so that's for some reason what we're compelled to constantly seek. And then I ask for communication with what some occultists might call their holy guardian angel, what the heathen might call their like higher self, or their guiding Norn, or their Fylgia. Depends on how we're sort of defining those terms. And then I ended finally with a thanks to the All-Father, and I also asked him to remove anything harmful that may have attached itself to me. And that's it, everyone. That was my experience with scrying Thurisaz. Lots of jungles, weird pygmies, a giant eye in the dark, a truth in the light, prayers to the thing that is most high, asking the gods to remove any parasites. What did you guys think? Did you like this episode? Put your thoughts in the comments below and share this. Give me a like. I know everyone's doing this now and it kind of feels cringy to even start doing it too, but the more you like and the more you share, the more time I can dedicate to doing these things. It's very hard to work full time. And then we just started doing other things on the side. Like we're working farmers market and door dashing now. So we're working like 60 plus hours a week now. And it takes a lot to do all of that plus all of your magic on top of it. And if you're doing these scrying sessions and you're doing the preliminary rituals, it takes a very long time to do this. Like sometimes an hour or more. And when you've worked like a 13 to 14 hour day, that is the last thing you want to do. So please, if you guys like this sort of stuff, and not just me, like anyone in this sphere, like if you like me, you like some other occultist doing the scrying stuff, if you're a heathen, go to Midgard Musing's channel, give him some likes, share his stuff, spread the word. We need more people at our backs. And in particular, we have to start supporting people who are more serious about the craft and aren't doing this because it's like a popular political movement. Like, you won't catch me out here like some creators saying, my religion is political, and giving you a bunch of political prescriptions. I'm just going to talk about magic, or aliens, or cryptids, or whatever philosophical thing I happen to be reading that week. I just read the first Harry Potter book. I might do an episode on that. I wanted to read it to learn why it was so popular. And I gotta say, like, after reading all the philosophy stuff I do and some of the magic texts, it is nice. It is comforting to just sit back, turn my brain off, and read some J.K. Rowling. I can't believe how much I enjoyed the experience. Which reminds me, I had a philosophy professor in college who was actually very into Jersey Shore, and it blew my mind. This guy was like a robot. Like, if you needed a journal article for a paper, he could close his eyes, tell you the journal, tell you the issue, and tell you what page the article started on in that journal. Now, this guy would go home, watch Jersey Shore. And now that I'm reading so much heavy and dense material, I get it. I kind of like turning my brain off and reading Harry Potter. Well, I guess I'm really delaying the ending. So if you've made it this far, thank you all. Thank you all for listening. So again, please like, share, subscribe, do all that social media jazz. And I can't wait to see everyone on the next episode. I am the host, Robert Knox. This is the Heretical Heathen Podcast. Thank you all and have a wonderful night.